Hi there, folks. Saber4 here with part 2 of Jump to Lightspeed meta decks. This time we're going to be looking at Cad Bane. I'm feeling a theme here. We're 2 for 2 on starting with villainy and a red-yellow shell. But these are going to be very different. They act in very different ways. They behave very differently. They really have a lot of different spice to them. So contents for this one. First off, we'll talk about why Cad Bane. We'll look at some of the staple cards from sets 1 through 3, the new additions that Jump to Lightspeed brought us. We'll show you the week 1 deck, kind of where we are at this point before we really dive deep into the meta of what's going on. We'll look at your turn 1 play, what the mid-game is, the Cad flip turn and the end game, and then we'll talk about the sideboard a little bit and the final thoughts. Before we go on, if you would, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It would really help me out with growing this thing, and we appreciate having you here. So let's talk about why Cad Bane. Cad Bane's a little bit bigger body at the downside, if there is one, of a 6 resource deploy. And what Cad does is that every time we play an Underworld card, we can exhaust him to ping a damage onto a unit. When we've got him on his unit side, we can deal 2 damage to that unit instead. Those are only once each round, but if you use it on the flip turn and you sequence your turn right, you can deal 3 total damage over that time. We're running him with Tarkentown because we want to kind of keep the board light. We're playing with red as our kind of splash color here, and we'll see that epic action can really help kind of trim things down. Set 1 through 3, some of our staple cards, and I'm showing these because this is some of the stuff that got kept, some of the stuff that kind of changed. But these are also things that you can look at if you are trying to take this deck, make it a little bit more your own. Maybe you don't have some of the pieces that you want. Maybe you're new to the game and you don't have some of the things from some of the earlier sets. Anyway, this is the kind of staple of what was in the 1 through 3 deck. That one ran Jabba the Hutt, and Jabba let you play tricks cheaper, but it also lets you pull tricks from the deck. There were 3 pretty big ones. Now there are 2 of them, Waylay and McClunky. And with Jabba, you were able to go and find these. In this deck and in the current meta, I think Jabba might be a little bit on the slower side. He's just not that powerful for a 4-cost unit. The tricks do help, and things like now there are 2 of them. Everything in this deck, with the exception of 1 card, which we'll talk about later, is Underworld. So you do have the ability to go in and pull things and play your next card with now there are 2 of them. But if Jabba's not going to be in the deck, and tricks aren't going to be discounted, and you're not going to be pulling to that card, it just didn't make sense to keep it. Waylay is a great tool. McClunky is probably one of the more useful cards in this deck. We're really looking at keeping some of that, but Jabba and now there are 2 of them wound up getting cut out of this version. Forlom and Zuckuss are 2 real big power players here. Forlom is able to ambush in at a 5 health breakpoint, especially if you have managed to keep that board small. Forlom is able to come in, get the Cad Bane ping, and then deal 4 damage. So he's able to hit for 5. Though there are sequences and plays where you will want him to just get to the board and live, because with Zuckuss, both of them gain ambush, both of them gain saboteur, both of them gain +1/+1, and that can mean that Zuckuss can take out some 7 health leaders. So there are instances where you might put Forlom down just for the point of having the threat of Zuckuss. Last, the thing that we took out of this deck a little bit is that this is not very space heavy at all. And so Triple Dark Raid came out of this version. And Triple Dark Raid really led into Ruthless Raider, which was a big-time reach card against control in Cad Bane. You can see some of those later on down in the sideboard if you wanted, but for right now, these are not part of what we're going to see in the main deck. What did Jump to Lightspeed add? These are some of the tools that we got. Contracted Jump Master is a major upgrade over the previous set because you had a 3/2 cost 3 Sentinel that you could put in space, and that drops against any fighter. Um, as we see them, transports are generally 4 health, fighters are generally 3. Um, and so a contracted jump master being a transport vehicle is going to give you something that fighters don't have. Mist Hunter, another of the good ones in here. You do have a lot of bounty hunters available to you in this deck. And so Mist Hunter is a passive card draw, but that passive card draw is a little bit of an upgrade over what Punishing One was doing. The Boba Fett unit, we have a nice size shielded unit on the ground that can just be difficult to deal with. You could look at IG-88. IG-88 with the pings that are in this deck is almost always going to be a 7/5. His ship, IG-2000, comes out and sprays damage. I really am looking a little bit more, though, at the Kimgola Heavy Fighter, which is an exhaust unit. Contracted Hunter, which is another of these that can come in and ambush at a 5. If your meta looks pretty heavy on Han and has some of those 5 health units in early, this is a good 3 cost answer because it can come in, defeat that 5 health unit. You know it's going to be lost at the end of the turn, but trading out that contracted hunter to get back your resource that got DJ'd, or trading that out to eliminate tech, or even if somebody smuggled in Cassian and is going to have a ready unit, now for 3, you've eliminated something they spent 5 on. Sada Nathano is a great piece of tech with this when you start talking about Cad Bane and vehicle-heavy decks, especially in the early game. Ithano, if you've got a unit out there, opponent plays an A-Wing or a Y-Wing, doesn't really matter. Any 3 health space unit, Ithano comes down, he's an Underworld unit, you activate your ping, you put Ithano out on that space unit, you give it -2/-2, you defeat it, and you don't have to use Tarkin Town. So you can preserve Tarkin Town by having this in your deck. As heavy as space is right now, this is just a fabulous way to do things. The last couple of them I wanted to talk about here on this slide, Boba Fett and Dengar. Dengar is one who I'm kind of on the fence with, but Boba Fett is one that I really do like. Boba lets you do damage directly, and most of the things that are in here are transports, while Dengar is looking at Underworld units, and that can be pretty big as well. So it just kind of depends on the speed of what you're doing. All right, the week 1 deck. So I'm not going to go over every single card in here to talk card choices, but what you can see is that we included a nice package of 10 first turn plays. You have the Hotshot Blaster in here that is intended to be smuggled out late. McClunky is in here. Absent from this would be Greedo, who is removed just because we want to play our mid-game a little stronger. And anything that pings, which I think that right now you've got a lot of that are likely to be meta staples early on. Anything that pings for 1 is going to eliminate Greedo. And it just kind of makes him awkward to fit in. You've got No Good to Me Dead. You've got the original Boba Fett unit who's still being able to take Boba Fett there and threaten 6 damage to anything that is exhausted is fabulous. Relentless Pursuit we'll talk about a little bit. That's a great thing for Cad's flip. But you do have a ton of things in here that are Bounty Hunter. And so you can play Relentless Pursuit to capture something that has come out under the curve of one of your Bounty Hunters and give it a shield. But that's also really great for Cad Bane. Cham Syndulla, I talked about in a previous video. Cham is anti-ramp. He is in a great spot right now, as strong as Han has been, and as much as I anticipate Han being a factor in the early meta here, and we're talking set 1 Spark of Rebellion Han. Han does his thing, he puts down an extra resource, and we're on 4. He went up to 5, great, now I'm up to 5 as well. And so Cham Syndulla also does that with Piet. Piet ramps, Champs and Dula anti-ramp. Brings you back up to even. Commandeer is great for anything that we see where vehicles are dropped without pilots. Up to 6 cost, it's going to take that vehicle, let you ready it, which very few other things do, attack with it, and then put it back in their hand. So yes, it's a 5 cost, but this is a great spot for kind of slowing down some of those opposing plays. All right, the turn 1 play. We got 4 things in here that are our turn 1s. Some of them are a little bit safer than others. Others are a little bit more conditional. Crafty Smuggler is your staple turn 1 play. It is going to stop your opponent from just pinging out your unit. I'm okay putting Crafty Smuggler down into an open field and expecting that he is going to survive that turn, unless your opponent decides that they want to 2-for-1 themselves. If you're sitting across from somebody who decides that they're going to use an ISB agent and then Daring Raid to get rid of your turn 1 play, great. That's just what they're going to do. The Star Hopper here is, I think, an upgrade to the Cartel Spacer. Though I do have the Cartel Spacer in the sideboard if you want a little bit more depth in your turn 1 or a little bit more of a stall. The Cartel Spacer allowed you to stall down anything that was 4 cost or less, while the Star Hopper is going to give you that on defeat trigger of 2 indirect damage. And so if your opponent is playing indirect, you can direct some of that back at them. So this provides you value even in defeat, where Cartel Spacer just went away. Bazine, we know very well. She's going to be able to pull a card from your opponent's hand, and she's a smuggle resource, so you can put her down in your resource row, wait until the right time, play it for 4, snipe a card out of that hand. That's just she's a high utility card. And then I talked about Sedana Thano already. Really good tech for space. Allows you to preserve Tarkin Town and kind of push into the later game with it. This also is going to interrupt people who are playing with Poe, because Poe is required to be on an unpiloted unit. And so they can't play their unit down. Sedana Thano gets on it. Even if it doesn't eliminate it, they can't flip Poe into that unit. Our mid game. We've got a 6 cost leader. We've got to wait a turn past where most people are going to be waiting for those 5 cost leads. So we've got to figure out a way in this deck to get to that leader deploy, because really Cad Bane is one of our win conditions. So what do we need to bridge there? Some things, like we said, the contracted Jump Master, a 2/4 Sentinel that works better. It's just a global improvement over a 3/2. It's an Underworld and a transport, so it works with Boba Fett. It works with Dengar. IG-88, if he wants to come out and pilot it, is going to make it a huge, huge transport, because it's going to be a 7 health Sentinel out in space that's going to gain the 3 because you're pinging units. Contracted Hunter and Forlom, ping plus ambush. We said that they both trade into 5 health units. The Kimgola Heavy Fighter allows that indirect damage, and if your opponents take some of that indirect damage to a unit, it will exhaust them. No Good to Me Dead. If you see somebody that goes out and pilots a unit somewhere, especially early on, you can lock it down for 2 turns with No Good to Me Dead. And that allows me to either buy time to kind of get some of my units in place to deal with it, or to ping that thing down where one of my units that's now under its value can deal with it. Champs and Dula, nice big body, good attack at a 5/4, answers ramp. He's the only thing in this deck that is a unit that is not Underworld. And then we talked about Commandeer. I've got it up on the screen here. Take control of a non-leader vehicle that costs 6 or less and doesn't have a pilot. If you do, ready it, attack with it, return it to their hand at the regroup phase. So a really good way to answer some of those triple dark rated in Ruthless Raiders, IG-2000, take your pick, whatever it is that's out there. Really great way to deal with that. The flip in the endgame, I wanted to talk about just for a second. We have a 2/8 Raid 2 leader. So when we're doing this, we can sequence our turn kind of one of two ways, depending on how we're set up. If we have a couple of Underworld units in our hand and still a board that we want to clear some things off of, we can sequence our turn so that we play a smaller Underworld unit on one side or the other of Cad Bane's flip. Deal 1 damage the first time, deal 2 damage the second time, kind of work to clear the board a little bit. This works really great if that unit happens to be something like a Crafty Smuggler and you don't have another unit, but you have McClunky. You can throw out Crafty Smuggler, deal the damage, resolve McClunky on the post flip, which you resolve the 3 damage first, then you deal 2 damage to another unit. And I've done 6 for 3 resources, and I still have the ability to either redeploy the Crafty Smuggler or to put down something like the Hotshot Blaster. My favorite play, if I get the opportunity, though, is to Relentless Pursuit, because my Cad Bane can capture anything that's a 6 cost or less, granting him a shield, and then to play Hotshot Blaster on him gives me a 4/8 raid 2 with a shield. And so he becomes a very difficult challenge to deal with. Last, we have the Cad Bane unit, and this is going to be able to capture anything up to 8 health and up to 3 units with a total of 8 health remaining. So if you've got still kind of a wider board there in that mid game, and you can get Cad Bane down on 7, get your ping, scoop up some units, and if nothing else, if they answer him immediately, you're going to exhaust as many units as you picked up. If he gets to attack, he's attacking in for a 7. He's got a nice big booty on him as well with a 7 health. And when they rescue a card, you draw 2. So this becomes a card draw engine if they elect to rescue. Last thing we're going to look at here, these are some of the ones that I have in the sideboard right now. I talked about them already. Cartel Spacer being a good low-cost early unit that allows me to exhaust. Contracted Hunter being a nice ambush for 5. Waylay we know well. IG-88. That's a 7/5 in most decks because you're going to leave something on the ground or in space that has damage on it. So this is deck number 2 of our series, and hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we will see you next time.